cranial surface of the parietal bone, of the occipital bone, are smoothened. We don't see them. We can recognize the bone from its inner surface. This is the place of it becoming. The last object is part of the skull. It is part of the human vault. It is also from the settlement. It is cut from the skull. It presents part of the frontal bone and parts from both parietal. The right one most presented, the left one cut. This is the inner surface. The only specific on the inner surface we see is the more pronounced relief of the vessels and some arachnoid granulations, which can't be assumed as a pathological changes, but there are some individuality of the person. We couldn't make a taphonomical analysis, but the cut of the skull shows it macroscopical examination points that possibly the skull was cut when it was wet bone. For the other material I presented here, we cannot say if they have been cut from wet or from not wet bone, as they are burned in the burned houses, first, and second, they were used a lot of time. It appears that the skull doesn't present some marks from being used after it was cut. These are the places from where our fragments, our material is cut. It appears that they were cut from at least 3 skulls after the reputation of the anatomical places from where they origin. Most possibly every of the object was cut from different skulls. We cannot say this. There are seen some marks, marks on the outer surface of the objects, which can be associated with some action in which these objects were involved. Here are the other such markings. In interpretation, we tried to find some similar objects. The only one from Bulgaria which were reported so far is the one from Rakla, the bigger one on the picture. It has a quite similar form. It has no stratigraphic situation. It's not defined from excavations. Possibly it comes from Neolithic layers as well. The ones from the Europe which have been published have some different form with 2 holes, not 1 hole in the middle. And they are quite, they have smaller dimensions. Most of them are found in sepulchres in necropolis environment. From nowadays, we have some ethnological and some recent finds. These are finds from America. They are from 14th, 15th century, I think. And we found some ethnological finds from India and Tibet. From India and Tibet, we know they were made to produce sound and to be used in ceremonies. In the necropolis, we found 2 individuals which had some markers for cutting on their skulls. The individuals were buried as normal for the necropolis and for the culture we examine. And here are the skull from one of them. It presents cuts on his skull. One of the cat is survived. The other cat is made post-mortem, these ones here. This individual had some traces for pathological changes. The other individual who had cuts in the skull was buried quite normal for the necropolis. It is seen in the picture. The small picture, which is not a detail, shows skull fragments we found somehow northern from the skull, from this grave, and we supposed these are fragments from skull from another individual, or buried or reburied fragments, or burial which had been destroyed in later works on the necropolis. It appeared that these fragments found northern from the individual, from the grave, were from the same skull of the buried individual in the grave number 14. They are marked here with blue points. The fragments which are from the individual from the grave are not marked with points. This cow beard one hole, as we see in the rondels, in the center of the rondels from the tail. And here is the other point. The tail presents also some traces from trepanations, but trepanations trepanation isn't made for rondel obtaining, and it is survived one. It hasn't been used for rondel. These are the flint objects from the tail. So what we can say for the interpretation, we must say that these objects were used in these houses we found in the settlement, not in the necropolis. They were used for the living person for some reason and in some activities, most possibly after ethnological and other data. They are ritual activities. One of the possible interpretation was one way of interpretation. It was after the ethnological data for old Bulgarian tribes and old Indo-European tribes, that these objects were used for preserving the power and possibilities of the preceders in the life of the next generations, and to take the powers of the enemies in the life generations. If they were enemies, we cannot say this because we found some cuts in the skulls in the necropolis, so we shall say that these were some people from the community which lived, not the enemies. And the other interpretation is that it could be used in some rituals as spindles, as in Moire was said, some magic rituals for the happiness of them and for the life of the individuals in the mount. That's my presentation.
Thank you very much indeed.